Good morning, everybody. Good morning, partner Pat.
Morning, Coach. How you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
We've got a great topic on the menu for today on the Coaching Life podcast. We want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to us on your Monday morning, or I guess it could be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, any day of the week. I mean, whatever day you happen to you happen to come upon this particular podcast and decide to listen to it. So if you are listening, we encourage you to subscribe if you enjoy, hearing what we talk about, and if you really enjoy it and you think that it could be beneficial to some of your friends and family members, by all means, share it with them. Share the link, and by all means as well, reach out to us and tell us the kinds of things that you have enjoyed, some of the topics that we've discussed, and maybe some of the things that we've said that have been challenging to you, either in a positive or negative way. We're very open to dialogue and open to think. I mean, we're doing this because we love to grow, we love to learn, and we want to continue growing and learning as well as serving and helping other people do the same. And so we always love the feedback when people send it to us.
Absolutely, and it doesn't have to be all positive feedback. I guess you could say if you have a position that
If you want to criticize us.
Sure, right? Yeah, I mean, do it nicely, but you can do it however you want.
Critique.
Critique.
You have a
There you go.
critique. We can take constructive criticism.
We can take criticism, right? That's how we roll.
That's right. Sure it is.
And let us know if there's things that you would like us to talk about that you haven't heard us talk about before. That's always a good thing to do. Helps us schedule our episodes.
Right.
So that'd work too. But we appreciate you.
And that kind of is what we're doing today. Is we tried to think of some things that we haven't talked about, and some things that maybe don't get talked about a lot out in the context that we tend to gear this podcast toward. For example, when we read about, listen to people on podcasts, go to conferences or clinics to learn about coaching, for example, whenever we address coaches, either on our podcast or just in general, when coaches are being addressed in in emails from league directors and things like that, typically the majority of coaches training, the majority of the kinds of things that we hear is targeted to head coaches.
Right.
And not everybody who works with kids in youth ball, high school ball, college ball, professional ball, in any kind of sport that you're playing is a head coach.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of coaches. In fact, there are a lot more assistant coaches out in the world than there are head coaches.
Yep.
And there's a lot greater need for assistant coaches in many cases than head coaches out there. And so what Pat and I would like to do today is talk a little bit about being a good assistant coach.
Yes.
How to be a good assistant coach and how to be a bad assistant coach.
Okay.
Not that you aspire to be a bad assistant coach, but maybe list some things,
some of the pitfalls.
Yeah, be careful to watch out for these things if you are an assistant coach.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, when they, especially in recreational leagues or youth sports, when the term assistant coach kind of leads a lot of people to believe that maybe they're just there in case the head coach needs some help, or maybe they're just there
Backup coach,
right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they don't necessarily
understudy
understand.
coach.
Yeah, right. Yeah, understudy. That's a good thing. Maybe maybe the coach is sick, so I'm going to fill in for him, make the lineup. But an assistant coach and a group of assistant coaches can have and do have major impacts on the team and on the program.
Oh, there's no doubt.
And as a head coach, it's very important. That process of finding your assistant coaches is a delicate one, and one that most head coaches that have been successful in the past and are going to be successful in the future put a lot of time into and a lot of thought in selecting their assistant coaches.
You're not kidding. One of the things that you're talking about here is a lot of times sometimes the perception is that the assistant coach is a lesser coach.
Right.
It's a lesser important role than being a head coach, and that just flat out is not true.
You saying that? Remember a couple episodes ago, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh yeah.
I remember when I was listening to the feedback of that episode, I remembered immediately what I was going to say, and I was going to point to We Are Marshall, the movie We Are Marshall,
yeah.
And Matthew McConaughey climbs up on the coach's building. He's building a building up there, and he says, "I want to offer you the assistant head coach's position." And he said, "Well, they offered me the head coach position. I turned it down." And he said, "Well, my offer's a little better." And he said, "Well, I don't understand how it's better." And he said, "Well, it's less pay, but same responsibility."
Right. That's exactly right. So it's a lesser position, right?
Yeah.
So, but an assistant coach is absolutely not. It's not a lesser role. It's not a lesser position. Yeah, it might be less pay, but you're going to have just as much responsibility. But there are some great things packed into that whole role of assistant coach.
Absolutely.
And it is a different role than the head coach. In many cases, a much different role than the head coach. And so we want to talk about some of those things today. And I can tell you, as one who, when I became a head coach, so I've been both. I've been an assistant coach and a head coach, and have been, in the context of my entire coaching career, considering youth and high school and adult age kids, people playing the game, I've been a head coach more often than an assistant coach. But I spent many years as an assistant coach, and so there are some things that I recognized in that role that were valuable lessons for me to learn about who I was and how I related to the head coach, how I related to the kids, how I related to the parents, and just the whole program, together. When I became the head coach of the varsity baseball team in Athens, the first thing I began thinking about was who my assistants were going to be, because I knew that our program was only going to be as strong as our assistant coaches.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that. It wasn't just something I threw out there to praise, at the end of the year banquet when you praise, you recognize your assistant coaches. It is an absolute truth. These men and women, whoever you've chosen to work with your program, have got to love the program. They've got to love the kids, and they should have a little bit of knowledge about the game as well. They don't have to have as much as you might think. In fact, I've had assistant coaches who really didn't play much baseball and didn't have a whole lot of knowledge, but man, they were good people. And to be honest, in many ways, some of the best assistant coaches I've had.
Yeah.
You
just think about the way the effect good people can have on players.
Yeah, just good people.
Yes.
Yeah. Whether they know much about the sport or not. And so it was, I tell you, it was priority number one for me the day that I learned that I was going to be a head coach. In fact, one of the first people that I called to be an assistant coach for the Athens varsity baseball team, ladies and gentlemen, was this guy sitting right here next to me. And you know what he told me? I don't have time for you.
Are we going to do this? I guess I did say that, but
no, you didn't. Listen, I'll be honest with you. You agonized over it a little bit. At least in your messages back to me.
I still do.
It seemed like you agonized over it. And the reason why is because you had kids that were really young and you were really involved in their lives. And I really admired and respected the fact that you prayed about it, you thought about it, and you gave it some time before you just, decided. And I knew it was a decision that you considered the cost. You considered every angle. And I could tell that you really wanted to help, but you just couldn't devote the kind of commitment that you knew it was going to be and still be committed to your family the way you wanted to be as well during those very formidable times of your kids' lives and athletic careers as well.
I appreciate you saying that. I've kind of lived all these years thinking I let you down.
Well, you did miss out on getting some hardware, I'll tell you that.
So. Yeah. I talking about this, I remember a time when I was Jake, my oldest son, he's 13 now, his first year of T-ball, and I was obviously right. I'm going to be the coach in that situation, but
dad coach.
Yeah. I assembled an amazing coaching staff around me, and that was one of the things that I knew that I wanted to do, and I knew it was very important, even at a young age, T-ball, because I thought let me establish this coaching staff, and then we'll just take these kids all the way up. Stay with them, keeping them together, same staff, we'll be in unity. I had 4 assistant coaches, and I was on top of the world. And I was proud of my assistant coaching staff. And I woke up one day and I realized that all of those assistant coaches were on my coaching staff, and they had female players on my team.
So there would be a day when those females would seek to play.
That's right.
Sports with their own
soon,
peers.
They're not going to be very, very, very long.
Right,
so
right.
So I woke up one day and I thought, man, they're all going to leave me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And that was a bad thing, but I just thought I'd throw that in because of the topic here. But
No doubt. So what makes a good assistant coach? There are a number of qualities, I think, if we just maybe phrase it that way. What are the qualities of a really great assistant coach? Mm-hmm. And I think to throw one out there right at the beginning, I would say loyalty to the head coach and service to the program and the head coach. When I say service, I mean you've got to support and serve that team, but you're also supporting and serving that head coach, and you're actually making the head coach look good. Mm-hmm. I equate being an assistant coach to, in a lot of ways, I think there's a lot of parallels here to what a catcher is like on the baseball diamond or softball diamond. I mean, a catcher is there to support the pitcher, to serve the pitcher, to make the pitcher look really good. The catcher does not get a lot of credit when the pitcher wins a game.
That's true.
But the truth is, a lot of times, the reason why the pitcher won the game is because of that guy that's behind the dish.
Because he's studying.
He's calling all the pitches.
He's
unless
remembering
you're
what the first hitter
micromanaging
did.
coach and you call the pitches. But and he's down and dirty in the he's in the trenches working for you.
That's right.
He's serving the team. The entire team's looking at him. He's leading the team. He doesn't get a lot of glory. He doesn't get a lot of credit, but he's probably the most important position on the team. In fact, I'm now convinced. I used to say pitchers were the most important position on the team. I think catchers are your most important position. If you're recruiting, you better find a good catcher.
Yeah, I mean that probably depends on age group.
1A, 1B. So they're both up there.
Yeah.
Right. So take that to assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Same type of role. You have to have that. You have to have a catcher's mentality and a catcher's mindset in the way
Kind of
you
better be there as a safety net.
The team. Yeah.
Yeah. As an assistant coach, you have to always be prepared for times when the head coach is experiencing a lot of pressure. That could be a lot of different pressure, external, internal, during games, during practice, and be able to recognize that pressure and then, do what it takes. And it might be a different task every day.
Yeah.
But be able to do what it takes to support the coach.
Man, I tell you, there were so many times, the assistant coach that I had with me for the 6 years that I was head coach at Athens, and he's still an assistant coach with the Athens program now, Chris Hewitt. I have said to many, many people who know us and who live in this area, you cannot find a better assistant coach than Chris Hewitt. He was so good at doing that very thing. There were so many times, we'd talk every night, but there were so many times I'd text him late in the evening and just share maybe a frustration or something that, some of those pressure points that we're dealing with as a head coach. And he was just so just matter of fact in his answers. So, and they were helpful answers.
Yeah.
They weren't just make me feel good, yes man type answers. It was, hey,
that's
coach,
a good point.
Well, let's think about it like this. Let's try this A, B, C, D, and he would outline a solution for something that I couldn't yet see a solution for, and it was just that kind of dialogue and that kind of communication was just it was golden, man.
Yeah.
It was really good to have.
Well, it's a different perspective, and a lot of times, the head coach is thinking about a lot of other things that the assistant coach wouldn't be. So the assistant coach, he or she could provide insight on a perspective that that the head coach has no idea of. Good listener.
Yeah.
I think being able to be a good listener and understanding what the head coach is thinking, but you said not being a yes man or a yes woman. And I think that's very important for an assistant coach to be able to say to a head coach. And it comes, there's something to be said about the relationship between head coach and assistant coach. An assistant coach is only going to be able to perform at a level that the head coach allows them to. I think that relationship is very important. As a head coach, you have to be willing to allow your assistant coach to stretch. Stretch their responsibilities a little bit, and understand that they're doing it for the better of the program, as opposed to just being right or something like that. But not, bringing your own perspective and bringing your own ideas that may sometimes not align with the head coach's ideas. I think that's a very important aspect or quality of a good assistant coach.
Absolutely, and you have to do that, and you want that. That's what's going to help create. That's what's going to help you as a team of coaches find the best possible ways for your team to move forward and to get better. Is if you bring those different suggestions or things that maybe are in disagreement with an idea that the head coach has, and that's one of the things that it can be so touchy, because sometimes you're working with a head coach that doesn't receive that very well.
Yes.
And I think that's where the relationship building and the trust building is so vital. And it's important for you as an assistant to recognize when you are, at what point am I working with a head coach who is willing to receive a different idea, a different thought, or disagreement. Hey, I didn't necessarily agree with the way we did this. We should talk about that.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot that goes in within this conversation. Like knowing when to disagree with the head coach. Never in front of other people.
Absolutely not.
Never in front of the kids.
Right.
Really, never in front of the other assistant coaches. If there's a team of assistant coaches. Never, ever, 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 ever in front of the parents. Never engage in conversation with parents about, because you're always, assistant coach, you're always going to have a parent come to you.
Yeah.
And disagree with something.
Right, and I think that's what kind
where
of brought
loyalty, unconditional loyalty right there is absolutely necessary. In that context, unconditional loyalty. Some of you right now are shaking your head going, bull manure, we're not, don't use the word unconditional, but in that context, yes. When you get back to the head coach in private and you have a conversation in private, if you even agreed with that parent, like in your mind, but not out loud, right, with a disagreement the parent has with the head coach, the private conversation with the coach is where you bring that.
Right, and if it's an issue so great that it's going to cause a splinter in the coaching staff, or it's going to cause you to go away, then it still doesn't need to be handled with the parents.
Exactly.
Or the kids.
If you have such an issue that you just I stand with the parent. Yeah, I agree. And that you can't get the head coach to budge on it, that sounds to me like you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, go ahead and leave.
Right.
That's your sign to go.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what we mentioned, that same thing in a previous episode. That's kind of what spurred this conversation.
Yeah,
because
right.
we said that we don't want to take anyone else's side but the head coach in a public setting, because parents will come to you and they'll say things and I didn't really like how I did this or did that. But what you have an opportunity there to model a behavior that you expect out of your players, and there's really you take one path or the other. You either model that and you provide a good example to your players, because even if we want our players to display that type of characteristic, we want them to be loyal, not just as players, but as people, right? So
loyal to their families, loyal to their job.
Exactly. And you're talking about something that's even greater than the baseball program or the softball program or whatever sport we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that, if you choose not to do that, one, you're hurting those kids, and you're hurting the program in general.
Yeah.
So it's a very touchy thing. You got to be really careful about what you say around other people, and it's not easy. You got to be aware.
No, it is not easy.
Everyone talks about how professional athletes they get put up, and college athletes too. They get put up on press conferences, and they'll say something, and they'll get.
We get mad because they give the cliche answers. We got to take it one day at a time.
And we get mad because they give the genuine answers.
Yeah,
in the heat of the moment.
Because we want to hear more behind the scenes. We want to hear what you're actually talking about in the locker room. So when they do that, that's when they get in trouble.
Right.
So we put them in impossible situations.
We do, but it's difficult for them to be in those situations. To know how to respond to that. And that's the type of thing that you need to be ready for. As assistant coach, and that probably doesn't. it probably doesn't happen. I wouldn't say that. I was going to say it probably doesn't happen on the same level when you're talking about youth sports, recreational, when you're just talking about, coaches that, typically aren't getting paid. But it still does happen. And
Sure.
Why? Because as we've established, parents are crazy, right?
Parents are crazy,
But,
and sports make us emotional, and we
Yeah.
tend to follow our emotions and respond accordingly
Right.
when it comes to youth sports. So.
Yeah. So as assistant coach, if that's definitely one responsibility that you have, even at that level where you're thinking, well, I might just be filling in. But if you're going to do that and you're going to accept that role and commit yourself to it, then understand that there's a direction that the team is taking. It's led by the head coach. Know your role, and support that direction. Support the head coach.
When I think when you make a suggestion to your head coach, I think one of the things a good assistant coach does really well is they're able to go with the flow and basically pivot whenever they bring a suggestion or an idea or something that maybe doesn't agree with a different way than a different way to do something than the head coach uses, or does.
Sure.
Sometimes the head coach will go with your suggestion and say, yeah, that's a better idea. Let's do that. A lot of times they won't.
That's right.
You'll bring ideas to them and they don't go along with them.
Yeah.
You got to be okay with that.
Absolutely.
And that's something that Chris Hewitt was really good at.
Yeah.
Really good at. He had lots of great ideas, and some, we making out a line. I always allowed him to give input on the lineup. And sometimes I changed he convinced me that, okay, you're right. We should do that. Yeah, we should pitch this guy instead. I know that so-and-so is scheduled to pitch, but you make a convincing argument here. Sometimes I'll listen to him and go, pretty good points, but I still got a feeling here. I'm still going to go with what we got.
And from an assistant coach perspective, you got to understand the buck stops at the head coach's feet. Mm-hmm. So that is their decision to make.
They're the ones that are going to get criticized for it if it goes wrong.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
They're not going to get the praise when it goes right, though. That's the joke about coaching.
Well,
when things go right,
it's
when
players,
things go right,
right?
it's the players.
Yeah.
When things go wrong, it's the coach. But
right.
And listen, if you don't like that, coaches, don't get into coaching because that's just the way it is. It's a joke. We joke about it, but it's true. I mean,
But as an assistant coach, you have to be willing. You have to understand that it's your job to present those types of options, present those types of thoughts, and still none of them ever being used.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's
so. You have to be pretty confident in yourself, and you have to be able to handle the fact that's going to happen, and yet the dichotomy here is you have to have that kind of self-confidence to be able to be okay when the coach says, no, we're not going to go with your idea. But the dichotomy is you can't have a big ego as an assistant coach. In fact, ego and assistant are not compatible terms. If you think about it.
True.
So, because sometimes assistant coaches struggle, and I'll be honest with you, after I'm in an assistant role right now, and after having been a head coach for a long time, I've got, of course, the ways I do things are always, they're the best. There is no better way to do something than the way I do it, right? Being facetious here, but that's just the way. So that ego gets built up when you're a head coach. It's like we talked about in the Parents Are Crazy episode, the former player parent, they know how the game is supposed to be played, and so they always have a better idea. Assistant coaches who have been a head coach always have a better idea, and if my ego is so big that I can't handle the fact that things are being done differently, that things can be done in a different way, just not the same way that I've done it, I'm going to probably have a tendency to try to force my way into that team. Sometimes it might be through gathering support, just chatting with other assistants and saying, hey, this is, we really could be doing this, a different way. What do you think about it? And then getting that assistant support, and then it's okay if you have, but again, it's okay if you have better ideas and you want to. But the appropriate place to go is to the head coach directly, one-on-one, and have that conversation.
Well, I think at that point when you're making those decisions, making those moves, at that point you've established that you don't want to be assistant coach, or at least that you're not being a very good one.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because you're creating challenges.
Yeah.
And that's not what you want to eliminate. As an assistant coach, you want to eliminate challenges.
Yeah, you cannot create dissension
Right.
Whatsoever on that team. It's just
right. So if you feel that way, don't you can't overcome it. If you can't be a good assistant coach, don't be one.
Don't be one. The number one trait of a good assistant coach is be humble. I mean, it's the opposite of having that huge ego. It's just is check your ego at the door. Be 100% about the team. Be 100% about that head coach that you're with. Be 100%. We're not saying you got to be best friends with that head coach.
Right.
You're not necessarily going to be. I mean, really, that was one of the things that Hewitt and I joked about a lot. Was we didn't hang out outside of baseball. The only relationship we had developed was a baseball relationship.
Yeah.
But I would consider him one of the closest friends that I've ever. I mean, just because we had such an intimate relationship as coaches during those 5 months of the year, or however long, some off season as well as in season stuff. And then the summertime came, and I might talk with him once a week, say, how's slow pitch softball going? Things like that. But we have different interests when that comes. But that when it's baseball season, man, we were tight.
Yeah.
But you'll have those kinds of relationships. We're not saying you got to be best friends with your head coach, but you're all about him though. You're all about the team. You're all about the program. You're all about the being the assistant there. So, and what that does is it builds trust, because that relationship that you have as a coaching staff, trust has got to be the mold that holds it together. And you as an assistant coach have a lot of influence when it comes to trust building on the team.
From a player perspective.
Yeah, from a player perspective, from a coaching staff perspective, because you're going to talk to the players individually, most likely more than the head coach is going to. The players are going to come to you. They're going to see you more as a peer, and there's a pitfall. There's a warning sign.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot. Here's the thing: a lot of assistant coaches, especially in college programs and high school programs too, are young guys. I mean, just a lot of assistant coaches in college. It's really bad in college. Really young assistant coaches just graduated last year. So what's the tendency for a young assistant coach? Buddy, right? Be friends with the players on the team. And the reason why is because the players on the team see you as the younger person as more of a peer. And so they come to you, they'll gravitate towards you with their jokes. It'll start out with their jokes, right? And people, and what's funny, Hewitt wasn't young. I mean, he was younger than I was, but he was, 29, 30 years old. He's still quite a bit older than the kids, but they would come to him with their jokes, and things like that, jab with him. But there was enough of a gap there that he was able to go, no, when it seemed like you're trying to buddy with me as a friend, no, I'm still in a position of authority over you.
Right.
That there's a line that's got to be drawn there. And sometimes I think assistant coaches, because of the nature and the dynamics of the way players interact with you, it's hard to see that line sometimes. The line of position of authority versus friendship.
Yeah, I think that's probably a program challenge, and I would say that's something that as a coaching staff you have to be aware of and be deliberate in managing. I really do. I think a head coach can see that at times when the assistant coach doesn't, or another assistant coach can see it. And you just have to maintain that relationship with the players. But it's definitely a pitfall. I think one of my weaknesses as a coach is that I do like to buddy with the players a little bit more than probably what I should. But I'm getting older now, so I'm not nearly as cool. So my opportunities are slimmer. But I started coaching when I was very young, and I think that was one of my weaknesses is that I wasn't as much of an authority figure as I should have been, and it creates a whole nother
it does.
Package of challenges that you got to overcome.
It's like what teachers are told when they first step into the classroom for the first time. It's a lot easier to start hard and back off of being hard, and lighten up a little bit than it is to start light and easy and then have to become hard when you need to get when you need to come down on someone. And so there's less of a tendency as a young coach to want to start out being more demanding and a little more standoffish, I guess, and then lighten up later than than to come in and want them to like you immediately. I mean, I think in today's world, especially, coaches want players to like them immediately, and sometimes that creates challenges because then when you gotta drop the hammer, we've got to get serious. We're not used to that. That's the way you look like a different person now because we got to know you as buddy coach.
Right. And then all of a sudden when that changes, when that shifts, it hurts the trust.
Yeah, it does.
And it's hard to get anything done without trust.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Because now you're a different person, right? Now you're a different coach.
Right.
So, yeah, absolutely. Good stuff there.
So a lot of this that we've been talking about, then maybe to wrap it all up into one concise thought, it would be as an assistant coach, it's really important that you understand what your role is, that you know your role, and when you said that a minute ago, Pat, know your role, it reminded me of when we talked about it during Christmas time.
Yeah.
And so I think as you come into an assistant coaching role, one of the most important things you could do is ask your head coach who is presenting this opportunity to you to be an assistant, what do you want me to do? I would like a clearly defined role because I want to be great in that role and I don't want to overstep my bounds. What are your expectations for me? What are your expectations for your assistants? And put that on the head coach. That's a head coach's responsibility to give that to you.
I agree with that. You don't always get that from head coaches, and I would even expand that and saying you want to know that type of detail on a day-to-day basis from a practice perspective.
Yes, you do.
You want to be able to meet with head coach. Say, okay, it's Monday. What are we doing in practice, and what do you want me to do?
I tell you, assistants, that's a really good way to keep the head coach on his toes. If you have a head coach that's not very organized, that doesn't think like that just kind of shows up and does it. And I know there are head coaches out. There are a lot of situations where there are better assistants in the program. There are assistants who are better coaches in the program than the head coach. And maybe you're in a situation where you recognize that's you, right? And what do? Well, you're still an assistant. But what you can do is you can come and you can ask those detailed questions like, okay, what do you want me to do? And maybe your head coach is humble enough to come back to you and say, hey, would you write the practice plan?
Yeah, all right.
And do it. Take it on and do it. That's a humbling thing for a head coach to do, but if they delegate that task to you, do it.
As a matter of fact, it's not a horrible idea if it does depend on the relationship. Obviously, I don't think you would just want to do this if you weren't comfortable with it. But maybe you wouldn't want to. You shouldn't go into a assistant coaching position if you're not comfortable with the relationship that you have with the head coach either. So, but to go ahead and write your own practice plan and submit it to the head coach. If nothing else, it's going to provide them your insight onto what the team needs to work on. Obviously that depends on like you said, a head coach, being humble enough to accept that type of thing. But,
I would say
it's just a recommendation. It's just a suggestion.
Right. Yeah. And I would say have that conversation with them ahead of time. Like,
sure.
Hey, coach, do you care if, what's your thought about me? Like, during the night before practice or during the day, I got to get some free minutes during lunch or whatever. I jot down some practice plan ideas and shoot them to you. And then you can feel free to use them or not, incorporate them into the plan or not. You might find that might be a way to approach that subject with your head coach without making the head coach feel like you want to take over writing the practice plan.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I actually do that now in the role that I have now with the softball team at Athens High School. In fact, this is a point that I was intent on making when I was asked to come along as an assistant with this program. So 2 years ago, when I stepped away from coaching baseball, my plan was to sit in a lawn chair and watch my daughter play softball.
Right.
Well, that plan lasted a couple days when I got a knock on my front door, and it was the head softball coach, and he said, "Hey, since you're going to be around, I would love it if you'd consider being in the dugout with us. If you'd assist." And so I walked out, we sat on the porch together, and I'm like, I really didn't want to, but it is kind of in my DNA. I love the idea of coaching, and I've never coached my daughter in this sport, and I would love to maybe have that opportunity. So yeah, I'll consider it. But before I do, I asked this question, I want to know very clearly what you're expecting of me. Because, the reason I asked that was because I knew that I would overstep my bounds. I knew that I would come into it. I would have a tendency to try to continue being a head coach of this program, and I would see things that I think should be done the way I think they should be done. And I wanted to make sure that I was only operating in the capacity that the head coach wanted me to operate in.
Sure.
And so we sat down and we talked about those things as well. And I feel like we have a really good relationship.
That's good. That's good stuff right there. Yeah. I think that's very important, and I would say that's important at any level. And it would having that conversation and the head coach evaluating that and putting thought into that and delivering that to their assistant coaches. I think that would help in a lot of ways, in a lot of levels.
Yes,
it's a very good idea.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about handling things. People will come to you with problems and issues, and you, because of the nature, you're a little bit closer to the ground level of the players on the team, which means you're going to see a lot of the things that are just small internal issues that the team has that the head coach may not necessarily see.
Yes.
And I would say that there are times when there are minor issues that you could take care of that the head coach really doesn't need to be bothered with.
Sure.
Because you mentioned earlier, the head coach has got a lot of stresses, a lot of things, a lot of pressures that, and especially really when as early as high school. I know it gets even worse the higher up you go. Maybe it does, maybe it gets better. But I'm telling you now, being a high school varsity head coach, you're doing very little actually coaching. You're so much red tape and bureaucracy to deal with through administrative things and fundraising things and making sure everybody's got their certification and making sure that the ones who are doing a lot of the coaching, this is the reason why you got to pick good assistant coaches, because they're going to be doing a lot of the coaching.
Yeah.
And so because of that, and because you're in that more of an administrative type role as a head coach, you don't always get a feel for some of the smaller minor things that are going on, maybe between players, or even things, I don't know what they might be. Just could be, we consider them to be minor issues that when you look back on it here in a couple of weeks, it's not going to be an issue. That's a minor issue, right? But it's got to be dealt with, or it could become a major issue.
Yeah.
Assistant coach, you can deal with that. You can nip those things in the bud.
Yeah, and have the ability to identify those, as opposed to, or being able to differentiate between a minor issue that you can take care of, or an issue that is creeping up into the program. For whatever the issue is, could be a lot of different things that the head coach probably does need to know about.
Yeah,
right? That's a skill too.
It takes discernment, right?
Yeah, to be able to decide what you do need to let the head coach in on and what you don't. And I would say that it's good for an assistant coach to try to have a good relationship with the administrative staff, the support staff that surrounds the program. So I'm thinking about the athletic director. I'm thinking about principals.
Other
teachers,
coaches
at that
particular school,
maybe even parents. You want to guard against
every team's got a team mom, and there are necessary relationships that you should have with parents.
Absolutely, and that not only does that help promote good things about the program, but it also helps you to be able to identify some of those minor issues at a more frequent rate, be able to do it more often. So
I think the assistant coaches have to develop the skill of just very simply, when you find a problem, find a solution. I think good assistant coaches are really good at seeing the problem and then figuring out a solution.
Yeah.
And sometimes the problem is small enough that the head coach doesn't need to be bothered, that your solution will suffice and it'll be done with. Sometimes the problem is big enough that you should involve the head coach.
Right.
That takes discernment on your part as an assistant to be able to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
So know your role, clearly define your role. If you don't know what the role is, just ask. And maybe if the head coach doesn't know what it is, if you ask the head coach, he's like, just, be my assistant. If that's his answer, say, well, can we sit down together and maybe define what that role looks like? There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, challenge him a little bit. And in fact, that's another great point for assistants, I think, is challenge yourself. You challenge yourself to continue growing in the sport as well. A lot of times these clinics and the meetings and the trainings are all for head coaches, and sometimes head coaches invite their assistants, and the assistants go along and they're trained as well. But I think sometimes as an assistant we tend to think that, well, it's the head coach's job to be up on all the rules. It's the head coach's job to be the smartest coach in the room, and that's not necessarily the case.
No, because you want to be prepared to be able to handle those types of things whenever they pop up.
Yeah,
so you really. The less pay, same responsibility joke that's actually true, because you actually want to prepare as if you are the head coach.
Yeah.
And you want to know as much about the program, as much about the sport, as much about everything there is to know from that head coach perspective as you can, just in case the need arises for you to complete an associated task.
Yeah. Yeah, there could be any given day when you're called upon now to be the interim head coach.
Right. Well, if you just think about, skill knowledge in itself, I would say that, everyone that takes an assistant coach position is probably, well, I shouldn't say that either. I was going to say they're probably pretty confident in their knowledge of the game. That may not always be true, but I would say that for those people that not, they understand what their role is better than others too. But I would say that, it's easy to say, well, I know a lot about the game. There's always more you can learn. And there's always times when, this has happened to me plenty of times. There's always times that in practice during a game when you have the opportunity to make a difference, and for whatever topic it is, I'm being very vague in general here. You don't know quite as much as what you thought you did about that.
Yeah, that's true.
So you want to try to eliminate that as best as you can, and you do that by getting better.
Right.
And I would say having energy. It kind of goes along with that, as an assistant coach, you want to have a certain amount of energy. And I'm not talking about, having to be out there, being a rah-rah. And not everyone's a rah-rah coach. Not everyone's,
Yeah, that's not what energy is, really.
Exactly.
It's sometimes false energy. In fact, we're trying to create something that we're not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
Right.
Doing.
You got to be yourself. But at the same time, have that commitment.
I'll tell you what energy looks like for my assistant coaches. Yeah. You're the first guy there. You're the last guy to leave. You're always you're asking what needs. How can I help get things set up right now? So we start on time. What can we do? What can I? And you just that's energy right there. That's you're bringing it to the program right there. You're setting the example of what it means to serve the team. That's energy.
Yeah,
and that energizes your team. It energizes the head coach, and it energizes the whole program every single day.
Yes.
I think one of the things that we could say is just be dependable. A great assistant coach is dependable. If I'm a head coach, I know I can always depend on that guy.
Yeah.
That's what an assistant coach is. Nothing to add.
I feel like that's been something that I've really elevated it personally about what being an assistant or even a coach in general entails, is being dependable, and dependable not just from a coaching perspective, not just to the head coach, but to the players and to the program as a whole. And because you brought it up, we talk about some opportunities that I've had to coach, and the dependability. I didn't feel like I could provide that at certain times of my life, and that's when I've because I felt like if I'm half there,
right,
there's a negative there, and that comes from the perspective of dependability.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, it had a lot to do with why you said no to me many years ago.
Not just to you, Coach.
That's right. I don't think you just don't want to coach, do you?
We will.
Why are you even on this podcast?
But we won't put this. We won't put this.
Some things to avoid, pitfalls. We've sprinkled that in our conversation. But I think to be very specific, if you want to know how to be a terrible assistant, here are a couple things to do, right? Which basically I'm saying, don't do these.
Yeah.
You're not a good assistant if you do these. I'd say number one, don't make it all about you.
Yeah.
It's not all. Like we said. It's a position where you have to leave your ego at the door. It can't be about you. This is not your show. And I'll even say this, even in your language and how you speak about things. Have you ever noticed this? Some people have a tendency, and this isn't just assistant coaches, head coaches do this too, and I tend to not like it. That when they speak about things related to the team or maybe even in the context of the game, they use a lot of first person possessive pronouns. Get me a base hit right here. I need you to throw me a strike right here. Hey, I need you to play right field today. And when I hear that, I think to myself, well, this isn't just your team.
Yeah.
You're not really the one. I mean, you want that kid to do that for you as a coach? Or is this something that the team needs right now?
Yeah.
We need. I mean, there's a big difference between you saying I and you saying we.
Yeah. I think people would disagree with you on that. I think they'd poo-poo it.
You think so?
Yeah, but I don't.
That's fine if they do.
I don't.
It's just a personal preference. I just don't like to hear that. I don't like to hear that. I think our words matter. Words matter a lot more than we think they do.
I agree.
And I have heard I remember one time, and I'm not going to say when, or it was actually a long time ago. It was a baseball team that I was part of. I wasn't yet the head coach. I was one of the assistants on this team. The head coach coached third base. The assistant coach coached first base. And I always heard the assistant coach shout things like, "Come on, hit me a ball hard right here."
Yeah.
Hey, I need you down here with me on first base, right? And it's like, Chris, you're splitting hairs now. That you're talking semantics now.
Yes, that's what I think he would say.
20 years later, I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
And it hits me. It hits my ears the wrong way because it sounds like, one, you're making this as a coach. You're making it more about you than about. I mean,
I think there's a bigger issue than that though, and it's the small deterioration of a team concept. And I would say if you don't think that's important, I would ask you how important is the concept of team to you, to your success as a program.
Yeah,
I think it's very important, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I think a team performs better than a group of individuals.
Yeah.
And when you make subtle,
and that is
when
very
you have subtle behavior, and
it's a very subtle thing.
It is, but we want to be the best, right?
Right.
I mean, that's our approach as people, as coaches. We want to be the absolute best. We should be. I don't know that any competitor goes into a situation like, well,
right.
6 would be
I'm okay with where I'm at.
Yeah, no, that's not what we do. We want to be the best, and if we want to be the best, then we would eliminate small. The details, man, they matter.
They do.
They matter a lot. So I completely agree with you on that. I'm on board with that. Yeah, and I say that even probably knowing that I've said things like that in the past. Yeah. But it's good to be aware of that.
It just I don't know. It just strikes me as a me-centered type of phraseology.
Yeah.
Out there on the field that. It's like it just like personalizes it a little too much, right?
Well,
this is you performing for me and not for us, and
yeah, I agree. I think it's a big deal.
I always thought it was a pet peeve, but I think there's a bigger. I think it's bigger.
Well, if you see it in a negative light, then it's probably likely that other people see it in a negative light, and probably even more likely that other people hear it in a negative light. You know what I mean? It has a subconscious impact on what we're doing as a team, more so than no one's saying anyone's being degraded or upset about these things, but it just plants that seed.
Yeah.
Just plants a little seed and those seeds grow.
Yeah. We talked earlier about how it's important for you to bring your ideas and your thoughts to the head coach and make suggestions whenever you feel like a suggestion is necessary. But one of the things that you might want to avoid as an assistant coach is pushing for your ideas regardless of how they fit with the team. You know, and this I actually bring this to the conversation from personal experience. Again, I'll talk about coming into the softball program as an assistant coach. I have ideas for how I think defense should be played on the baseball field, I should say. And I was pushing for a particular. I brought to this team a drill that we always ran, a structured PFP drill where we had pitchers. It was very fast paced, working with pitchers covering first base, things like that, and covering bunts and such. And a lot of softball programs don't have their pitchers fielding bunts very often. In fact, they feel like if a pitcher has to come and field a bunt, by the time she picks it up and throws it to first, the majority of the time a girl that's bunting is beating that out. You got to have, your third baseman's got to field everything pretty much on a bunt. That's a philosophy that some softball programs, maybe others use the pitchers more often, but I've heard more often than not people saying, a pitcher should cover bunts. I mean, obviously if it's bunted back to you, be able to cover it. And a pitcher should be able to get off the circle and cover a bunt, but you can't depend on that being your primary person to field the bunt. As a baseball coach, I wanted my pitcher to field every bunt he could get.
Yeah, well, the distance makes a huge difference.
And it makes a huge difference. And I want to, and anything hit, for example, any ground ball hit to the right side of the infield. So as a pitcher, anything hit to your left, we always want our catcher shouting, "Get over." We want that pitcher covering first base, covering first base, covering first base. Most softball programs have second baseman getting over and covering first base.
Oh, really?
Because on most plays, they got the shortstop going in and covering second, and the second baseman moves over to first base a lot because that first baseman's charging a lot more than they are in baseball. So just a lot of little nuanced things like that in the game. If I come into this as an assistant coach knowing that I have a lot of knowledge about how to play defense, assuming that that's the way it should be done on this team, then it's going to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to get offended and I'm going to think that you're stupid for doing it this way. But I got educated about a few things when it comes to softball defense that was different than the way the baseball defense was. And I had to be okay with, just say it plainly, being wrong.
Yeah.
Having an idea and my idea not being the most efficient way to do it in this particular sport.
I think you run into that a little bit from, as you move up in the youth levels, even in baseball, because, 12U baseball, well, not all 12U, 10, let's say 10U maybe, not even all 10U. But typically in our area, I'll say in southeastern Ohio, we play 60-foot bases in 12U baseball.
Yeah.
And, that changes
Little
next year,
rules,
from 12U to 13U. Now you jump up to a bigger distance. So you do see a contrast in the way certain coaches, their cutoffs, their cutoff system and bunt coverages and things like that. It changes from one year to next. So you have a lot of conflict between coaches that, well, this is how we've always, this is how we've always done it. Well, I've coached here. This is how depending on where they're coaching. If they're used to coaching the older kids and they're coaching 12U kids, they could be doing things that isn't, a great way to do it, as a 12U coach and vice versa. So yeah, I see what you're saying there.
Yeah. So be able to bring your ideas without feeling like your ideas should be implemented, and you just understand that it's never going to be a good thing to try to push for your ideas. It may not fit with the team. It may not fit with the way that, with the dynamics of that team. And sometimes you don't know what's best.
Yeah.
And be okay with that. Realize that. Do you have anything else that comes to mind that you want to make sure that we talk about? Because I think there's a good way to wrap it up.
I don't think so. I think, like you said, we kind of talk. The opposite of the qualities of an assistant coach kind of speaks to the areas that you don't want to find yourself in. I think if you and more often than not, I guess in life, if you focus on the positives and doing what you need to do, you'll eliminate the negatives just by proxy. So
yeah. If you show up and your goal is to serve, it's going to be a pretty good relationship. And I think it's going to build the most important thing, which is trust. And as an assistant coach, you must maintain unquestionable trustworthiness.
Yeah.
I think if there's one thing that we'd like, that I would like to leave everybody with, take this with you. Trust. Well, first of all, it's the cornerstone of any relationship. There needs to be trust, and trust creates that. Well, it creates a sense of loyalty between both you and the head coach. You're going to be loyal to the head coach, and the head coach is going to be loyal to you as well. That's going to be a two-way relationship there. When we're asking you to have unconditional loyalty, it's not just you to him or her. That head coach will be loyal to you as well.
Absolutely.
They're not going to throw you under the bus either. And so that trust is a two-way street. But you come into that and you do everything you can to build that unquestionable trustworthiness at all times. And when you do that, you're going to be part of a really great coaching staff. It takes really great assistant coaches to have a great coaching staff. And it's not cliche. Behind every great program is great assistants. A lot of you out there listening, maybe you're an assistant coach. We hope that this has been helpful. We hope that you can maybe immediately apply some of the things that we've talked about to your own life and your own program.
Yeah. If there's anything we missed or anything that you disagree with, you want to add, as always, let us know. We want you to join our conversation. You're always welcome.
Join the conversation. The Coaching Life.